Russo-Japanese War. Pacific Fleet gets bottled up in Vladivostok, Russian land forces getting BTFO. Admiralty decides to send the Baltic Fleet to the Pacific to save the day. 6 battleships, most modern warships Russia has. Crews and ships completely unprepared for combat. The battleship Ethereal sinks in the harbor before they even leave. Finally make it out into the North Sea behind schedule in autumn 1904. Britain is Japan's ally, not at war but suspected of aiding the Japanese somehow because you can't trust merchants. Midnight on the North Sea, Dogger Bank off the east coast of England. Suddenly, the supply freighter Kamchatka signals that she is under attack by torpedo boats. Panic.jpg. Entire fleet comes about and steams straight in to save their comrade, guns blazing. The cruisers Aurora and Dmitry Donskoy are misidentified as Japanese and hit repeatedly by friendly fire, killing a sailor and a ship's chaplain. Numerous cruisers report being hit by torpedoes, begin emergency maneuvers. The battleship Borodino reports being boarded by Japanese forces, crew attempt to abandon ship. 20 minutes of panicked firing later, someone signals to cease fire. Searchlights illuminate a tiny cluster of unarmed, severely distressed British fishing trawlers, one slowly sinking. 3 Englishmen dead. Oops. Russian fleet decides to just keep sailing and pretend nothing happened. Next morning, trawlers limp home, the Royal Navy absolutely flips their shit and raises steam on the entire Channel Fleet. Suddenly the Russians find their 6 battleship fleet being pursued by 28 battleships. Surrounded and forced to park off Spain until St. Petersburg finally apologizes and gives Britain enough money not to sink their entire navy as revenge. If you're counting, you'll have noticed that the Russians only managed a 2:3 kill ratio against unarmed fishermen. The Ethereal fired 500 shells and hit nothing. This is the fleet they expected to save Vladivostok from the Japanese. The Baltic Fleet, or 2nd Pacific Squadron, was comedy freaking gold all the way from St. Petersburg to Tsushima. Fleet preparing to set sail, when a mysterious submarine is found in a crate aboard an American clipper. Base goes on full alert because it must be an attempted Japanese sneak attack. Turns out the Russian Admiralty bought a submarine but forgot to tell anyone in the fleet or the port authority. Bongs finally let the fleet go after holding them hostage at Tangiers under the guns of half the RN. Circumnavigating the Cape of Good Hope, support freighters and transports keep falling out due to mechanical failure. Baltic Fleet finally reaches Madagascar, only to find a message ordering them to hold there indefinitely. Turns out the Admiralty decided to dispatch reinforcements, all old, broken down ships which the fleet commander had explicitly refused, with orders to locate the Baltic Fleet, whose course and heading are unknown to us. 2 months sitting in port at Madagascar in summertime. All crews are confined to ships the whole time. Malaria everywhere. 4 different torpedo destroyers lost to mechanical failures just from sitting at anchor. 3 separate mutinies by pissed off, diseased crewmen. Reinforcements still not there. Decide to hold gunnery practice. Every single battleship misses their targets on every salvo. Exactly 1 hit scored, on the tug towing the target ship. Gunnery practice is aborted early because it turns out the Admiralty didn't issue enough ammunition for the battleships. While Kamchatka suddenly starts signaling that she's sinking for no reason and one of the cruisers has to stop practice because of a very large snake wrapped around the breech of their 4 battery. Dozens of crew dead of malaria, decide to hold funeral at sea. Borodino accidentally uses live ammunition for the salute. Hits the Aurora, again. Reinforcements finally arrive. You're screwed now, Psychonips. Tsushima ensues.
Be me. Get a call from a friend, telling me and my crew we are heading off to the Caribbean Sea. We packed our bags and traveled there by ship. Friend gives us a backstory about his grandfather and the reason why we are traveling there. We arrived at a rural town. I sent my friend out to gather some intel. He came back with the information that requires some locating. The 8 out of 10 QT and I broke into a chest. I ran out to get some tools. QT then complains she has been blinded. I helped her come back to safety. Fast forward an hour. My crew stole one of the ships. We used it to get to an island where the treasure is. It has been located. Suddenly some killer asshole kidnapped the QT. We spent the next day planned a way to rescue her via some tasks. Operation Day. We get the location of the QT. I got the ship to deeper waters. Summoned a monster to assist me while I rescue the QT. Killer asshole challenges her to a duel. She whacks him to his demise. We hired a frogman. I get a girlfriend. Later, virgins.
K/ has acquired a Nimitz class carrier. What do we fill it with and what do we do with it? Daily gun drills on the deck. Well, we better pray that at least a handful of commandos have learned to operate and service a nuclear reactor while watching Upload in their mom's basement. The carrier. 1 part snow crash raft. 1 part fuck yes sea land. 3 parts let's shoot some pirates. 1 part who put this kiddie pool on the flight deck. 2 parts why are the walls of the officers' mess covered in spray paint and semen. 3 parts why didn't anyone bring QT pie wafer-worthy GFs and girls. Captain's log, the carrier, day 71. The crew are restless. It has been 3 days since we last sank a Somali pirate flotilla and we've been banned from making port of call in Madagascar, India. And the Seychelles Islands after our recent debaucherous visits there that left walls full of Ndiad bullet holes and every prostitute within 20 miles of port seeking deportation Oregon retirement. As the captain, I'm also concerned because our XO has recently fabricated a kilt out of loaded nugget food stripper clips and wears nothing else. The XO has also taken to defecating on the flight deck and smearing his feces into pictures of boobs, penises, or firearms. The crew are equally disturbed. I have taken reports from section chiefs that some of the enlisted sailors have begun wearing nothing but war paint, and entertain themselves by attaching unused machinery to the steam catapult just to launch it off of the flight deck. Are we fighting the pirates, or have we become the pirates? Excellent points, both. Captain's log, the carrier, day 185. Our unruly crew is beginning to work as a team. Aside from a few accidental deaths from misuse of the steam catapult, and falling off the flight deck while drunk, operations are relatively safe and becoming more cohesive and effective. Earlier this week, in the interest of acquiring more full retard acts to enjoy, we hosted His Eminent Excellence Kim Jong-il on the carrier. His entourage included many military and science officers that were interested in carrier operations, and wanted a full spec sheet and the opportunity for further study, in the hopes of reverse engineering our beloved ship. On day 2, after a private meeting with our still kilt-wearing XO, 3 Mi-12s full of best Korean QT pies were greeted on the flight deck. The entire crew aside from a skeleton element required for continuing ops were treated to a very nice, impressively choreographed QT pie drill and ceremony performance. Unfortunately, while we secured 6 full-armed Hind DS and 5,500 Kalashnikovs and 500,000 rounds of ammunition, keeping the QT pies would have required hosting Kim Jong-il permanently to get him away from his fat prick with Missile's son, Kim Jong-un. He intends to fake his death, apparently. Captain's log, the carrier, day 262. Operation Crusade is in full swing. With the air support spearheaded by the Hind D gunships and other improvised air technical helicopters, which includes a shithook, in which our weapons officers somehow found a way to safely mount a short-barreled 105mm howitzer, with twin Mk-19s on either side as door guns. This shithook, unsurprisingly, has the call sign Dhaka. We have enjoyed considerable success establishing a beachhead and maintaining air superiority over the various skinnies, butts, and whatever else continue to harass and pirate in the region. Recovering any trophies or artifacts from the Black Hawk Down incident is also of considerable interest, and our second-line ground teams have weaponeer detachments to recover and salvage any technicals and support arms we can find. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 265. Operation Crusade has been a resounding success. All operational pirate skiffs and ships have either been captured or scuttled, and the military infrastructure and warlord elements in the port coast of Somalia have been decimated. We've established a landside base with a contingent to maintain port security and act as a new base of operations. Within a couple weeks, I hope to gradually increase the contingent on land, but that will depend on their ability to stop taking pictures and making a meme competition for jungle tits and National Geographic titties that apparently abound absolutely unrestrained in the region. I've placed our senior Russian expat, Major Ivan Chesnikov, in command of the contingent as his seaside manner has deteriorated greatly. And his typically coherent rantings against the desecration of Russian and Warsaw Pact firearms frequently turn into Russian-accented incoherent screaming in high seas, or whenever his shipboard vodka still malfunctions or produces a questionable batch of hooch. I've ordered the still moved landside as a result. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 289. Following the repeated AARs on Operation Crusade, our higher leadership meeting, at the drunken insistence of our XO, expanded to include outlining a plan for, as the XO inimitably put it, a phase motherfucking deuce to Operation Crusade. Several potential targets and AOs were discussed, but leading our prospects of both the opportunity for unmitigated violence and visiting said violence upon the most deserving examples of humanity, Iran prevailed as the leading choice over Los Angeles in a heated debate. We sail for the Persian Gulf after vodka supplies are replenished on board, and we get our newly acquired Typhoon-class submarine christened and fully operational to serve as a forward observer for the main invasion fleet. The crew's morale could not be higher, as following the successful Operation Crusade, a nightly karaoke competition in the main mess hall has gained a great deal of popularity, though the fleet-wide broadcast of the karaoke contest resulted in numerous and suspiciously deliberate faults found in shipboard pause after a South Korean gunner's mate performed a rendition of Mariah Carey's Touch My Nugget. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 291. Correction to Day 289's entry. I suspiciously used the word moral accidentally instead of morale. Not sure if spellcheck accident, and not sure if my PC's becoming ironically self-aware. Morals, as an overall concept, are quite nebulous within the fleet and even on board the carrier. I hear reports from section chiefs where crew will come to blows, as in the swinging fists kind, not the applied with lips and vacuum kind, when debating whether or not the traps among the crew are the better lays than the trans members of the crew. Strangely, the inclusion of natural XX chromosome females in the discussion was never noted, and the XO laughed when I mentioned it, and loudly proclaimed there are no girls in the flotilla. I reminded him of our enduring search for at least one authentic girl for the sake of affirmative action. His Chesnikov vodka-fueled retort was a rapidly delivered and very angry-sounding rant about ponies, glitter, and fucking oneself as he turned around to field strip his Krinkov right there on the bridge. That reminds me, cans of 7 and 6, sardines, and Zagnut bars are a priority for our acquisitions officer. In other news, a container ship recently joined the flotilla after being declared unserviceable in its home port of Singapore, and it joined the fleet after absconding with its entire payload, which, fortunately, included dozens of conics of Red Bull, Mountain Dew, Tabasco-flavored Slim Jims, and women's lingerie. To celebrate its commissioning into the fleet, a cross-dressing commando lingerie show is planned in 3 days' time. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 315. Operation Phase Motherfucking Deuce Crusade has been a resounding success. By skirting the various no-fly zones, we've successfully mobilized forward infantry elements with our fleet of Hind DS and shithooks without a single operational loss in deployment. A close call was had by the support shithook gunship Dhaka when the 105mm was fired at too low an altitude, and almost caused it to crash. When asked about the target engaged, the weapons officer, CW2 Krabs, insisted the 105mm be used against the BMPs and other lightly mechanized Iranian kebab infantry resistance because fuck those guys. Following the removal of much kebab, all personnel and assets were successfully extracted before Iranian F-14s and other aircraft could be scrambled to intercept, and all safely arrived inside the safety zone of the carrier CWIS systems. Tragically, despite all attempts to the contrary, we could not capture an Iranian F-14 for our resident Top Gun. Capturing an Iranian F-14 remains a primary objective of Operation Phase Motherfucking Deuce of the Crusade. By day 320, we hope to be remobilizing to travel through the Suez Canal and commence removal of Albanian and Serbian kebab in Phase 3. Captain's Log. The Carrier, Day 346. After nearly a full year at sea, the crew have finally become a cohesive, efficient machine. With the XO's new leadership, we now collect all of the ship's human waste in a tank that can feed any of 4 specifically adapted water cannons on the sides of the vessel to repel attempted boardings without wasting ammunition. The lead weapons officer has also developed a rotary point defense weapon from 8 nugget barrels that is fed nugget food via PKM belts that became plentiful after the hugely successful landside assault on some random Somali warlord's beachside port. The constant influx of volunteer crew have permitted me to become rather selective of who we take on board. To my absolute surprise, there's actually at least one non-trans female on K that requested duty here as a radar officer. Every other female on board is either trans or a trap. I am not sure the crew has even noticed. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 377. The XO and Major Chesnikov have hatched the most daring, and most meaningful operation ever proposed to the Commando Flotilla, the capture and subsequent onboard relocation of the glorious murder Cuba. Sympathetic assets in the area of the Cuba have been contacted, as this raid will require plainclothes civilian assistance for a total distraction if it has any chance to succeed. The crux of the plan relies on stealth and avoidance of contact and weapons usage. As ironic as that seems, it is critical if we are to successfully abscond with the Cuba without attracting attention to our fleet, the fleet's new proximity to the US and Canada's eastern seaboard, and of course, prevent any attempts to reclaim the Cuba from us. 2 shithooks will be modified to transport the Cuba, to provide a primary and ALD raid helo for main extraction. The shithook gunship, Dhaka, will support. A large rainstorm is approaching the location of the Cuba and will fly through the rainstorm to mask the sound of the shithooks as best as possible, and will extract the Cuba with carefully placed demolition charges on the ceiling of its prison. I pray to the Cuba's glory for the success of this mission. Alex Nexalia. Captain's Log, The Carrier, Day 383. It is with the greatest regret and deepest sadness that I report the passing of one of our premier officers, Major Ivan Chesnikov. During the daring raid to recover the murder Cuba, Major Chesnikov led the raid himself, and at the most critical part of the raid, the breaching charges to be used on the roof of the murder Cuba's prison experienced detonator failure. Major Chesnikov, with complete disregard for his own safety, jumped from the safety of his helicopter down to the roof by throwing his axe sling around the steel hoisting cables that were to be used to pull the piece of roof off the top of building by Shithook 1. And using his AK and sling as a zip line. Knowing fully that his actions would kill him, he manually placed detcord to each breaching charge, and set off the detcord by using one hand to repeatedly swing the buttstock of his Axe 74 down on the end of it to initiate the blast, all while singing the Soviet march. And emptying a 75-round drum on full auto from his AKMSU held in his other hand. Nothing remained of Major Chesnikov after the blast except for his AKMSU, and his Axe 74, both of which functioned perfectly and only needed to be dusted off and reloaded. Major Chesnikov's actions alone ensured the successful recovery of the Cuba, and for his gallant sacrifice of his own life for the sake of the Cuba, we hereby posthumously present Major Chesnikov with our highest honor, the Order of the Cuba. A public memorial service will be held on the aft flight deck at 1600 ship's time. Duty weapons and vodka for mast 21 gun salute required, blanks not required but somewhat encouraged. Captain's log, the carrier, day 485. The carrier is now the proud flagship of an entire flotilla of crew that includes several previously decommissioned Soviet nuclear submarines, to include much of their former Russian-speaking crew. We have 2 actual bilingual translation chiefs to ensure actual communication with the captains of those vessels, but communication amongst the enslighted is largely done by exchanging memes and pornography. I was recently made aware of the fact that the Typhoon-class sub recently christened the Communist has on board an entire complement of Soviet nuclear subsurface launchable ICBMs with warheads. For inexplicable reasons, the targeting computer is missing. I will work with our chief weapons officer to patch up a suitable substitute with smartphones or a Garmin. The crew and vessels in our flotilla have been universally banned from making port of call anywhere in the Western world, so we largely dock and resupply from various ports in the South Atlantic or Southern Indian Ocean. The trans/trap/female contingent of the crew have all been reassigned to our ex-Soviet missile cruiser, the Claptrap, and the captain of that vessel is having a Freddie Mercury look-alike contest to celebrate having painted every missile on board to mimic various ethnicities of penises. Piracy around Somalia has completely disappeared. The crew are hungry for action, so we're headed to the Black Sea via the Mediterranean, and hopefully will encounter an Iranian flotilla on the way. The captain of the Claptrap has bid for and claimed the right of first engagement of any hostile Haji vessels. Captain's log, the carrier, day 512. The UN and most of the developed world have expressed concern about our recent reactivation of full global nuclear capability between our Typhoon-class submarine, the Communist, and the nuclear-tipped tomahawks recently found in a Cuban port raid that were in crates labeled Dragon Dildos in Kakatana. At their behest, we sent an emissary to represent us to the UN and have set up a consulate in an old South Brooklyn hamburger shop previously owned by illegal Bangladeshi immigrants. They tried, but could not teach any of our contingent there how to successfully cook a hamburger without using a flamethrower or Molotov cocktails. For the moment, I've ordered our emissary to simply occupy that building and serve only fountain drinks and bottled liquor. Thanks to diplomatic immunity, the emissary and his contingent proudly carried a full armament of Jenkem-worthy full retard axe, bubbed nuggets, and tactical DARs. Negotiations are underway to disarm, but are not expected to succeed. Still, being recognized as a nuclear power and accorded full honors despite being a flotilla of overweight unwashed and sexually deprived neckbeards, fishnet-wearing traps, and alcoholic Eastern European/former Warsaw Pact expats that blather on drunkenly in their native languages when not actively shooting at something.
I'll start. Be me. 20-year-old Croatian student. Looking for a summer job to get some cash before uni starts. Friend that lives on one of the islands tells me a captain of a tourist ship is looking for crew members. Always liked boats.jpg. Learn there's only 2 people working, captain and his buddy. Buddy is good for nothing dipshit, only got the job cause he's captain's friend. Captain is experienced sailor, teaches me everything. Work 12 hours every day, sometimes alone because dipshit buddy is always drunk or hangover and doesn't even show up. Pay isn't much, the job is hard as shit since I do 90% of the work, captain has to steer the ship so can't help me, still love every minute of it. When I get free time I talk with tourists and try to score QT pies. Get built because of constant hard work, look like Popeye on steroids. Bestiobover.mp4. Last week on the ship, give captain notice so he can find replacement. Cap finds a fat inexperienced kid to replace me and asks me to teach him everything. Haven't seen dipshit buddy on the ship for a week now. Kid is basically useless, but he's got heart. Teach him how to tie the ropes after leaving port, kid just can't seem to get the hang of it. One day we sail out on strong winds. Cap puts me on horde control so tourists don't get jumpy. Kid has to tie ropes. He doesn't. PNG. About 6 nanometers off the coast, tourist knocks the rope over while nobody's watching. Rope gets tied up into the propeller, ship stops. We're adrift in butt fuck nowhere while the wind is wrecking our shit. Cap tells me to go under and cut the rope free. I don't know how deep it was where we were, but the water was dark as shit as seen from ship. Nevertheless it was that or we drift for hours or sink due to wind. Take off my shirt and jump into the freezing hell water. Cap throws me the mask and the knife. Swim to the propeller and start cutting. Constant feeling something is watching me. Go out for air, rope is a thick bitch. Dive back and look into the deep. I shit you not, something is down there. Panic and starts cutting as fast as I can. Look down while cutting. FML. Some shit is still moving down there, and it's fucking big. Cut my hand cause wasn't watching, but rope finally snaps. Feel like the fucking fool who itself is about to snatch me. Rip the rope from the propeller and swim to surface. Don't even use the stairs, climb onto the ship using anchor. Anon WTF or bleeding, are you okay? Cap looks at my face like he's seen it before and takes me to the ship hold. Tourists cheering me like I saved the fucking country or something. I can't even get my breath back because of fear. Cap patches me up and gives me the rest of the day off, says he and the kid will take care of the horde. Doesn't even ask what happened. Next day I quit, Cap is sad but says he understands. Fast forward 2 years. Never stepped foot on a ship after. Massive fear of the depths. Can't swim more than 100 m from the shore. Before anxiety kicks in. Still have nightmares about it, nobody believes me when I tell them. Maybe now I understand SAP's buddy. Maybe that's why he's drunk all the time.
Read this, they know what happened and also why communication was lost. I know someone in the Coast Guard who works with sea rescue. I hear there was a gas leak on it. They heard strange noises, like a rumbling, before they submerged, and there were even signs of it before they began the descent, but the crew didn't want to say anything because they are high-profile clients. Well, basically as they submerged, the radio communication picked up on the sound. It was a like kind of wet sound like a balloon deflating, and they heard everyone inside of the submersible start to panic. So it is believed at this time from NASAR, North Atlantic Search and Rescue, that this was some kind of noxious gas, causing unconsciousness, and that's why the fail-safe systems didn't kick in. Another report is that there was someone inside of the cabin freaking out because it is said there was liquid spewing all over the cabin and clogging the instrument panels. Apparently it is a really disturbing audio. Apparently with the submarine just fell straight into the hole where the grand staircase was. The leaked camera footage has it. And the whole way down they are playing the glorious Titanic theme music. This is to wow their customers and make it more theatric, but there is also in the background explosive diarrhea farting sounds and frantic screams of panic and disgust. So the submarine is just sealed in the middle of the Titanic with all that diarrhea farting and gas trapped in it. The current thought is that one of the people on board was gassy and that's why they smelled it before they submerged. Because they were letting off some steam or crop dusting in order to relieve bowel pressure and ultimately couldn't hold it in, so had diarrhea farts on board, and basically the whole cabin became filled with liquid excretions causing everyone to lose consciousness.
Be me. Start life as a crew member on a ship. Captain is kind of a jerk. Can't take it anymore. Mutiny with crew brothers, become the new captain. Arg matey. Sail around for a while, kicking ass, and taking ships. Barmaid tells me a Spanish treasure bullion is headed for Rio de la Hasha. Disgonabegud.jpg. Land in Le Hasha. No treasure ship in sight. Governor tells me ship won't be here for 2 months. His daughter walks in. Hottie/10. Where have you been, meolalift.htm? Asks me to the balm lady. Find out dancing not too different from ship in a storm, just have to stay on both feet and not shit in pants. QT is impressed. Gives me a fancy dueling sword. Governor tells me to help deliver ultimatum to some French town. Verb gonna start a war. Doc. Take down a couple of French ships, one of them is loaded. Crew very happy with incoming gold. Go back to Le Hasha and spend all the gold for diamond necklace for Bay. Crew threatening to mutiny. It's salgoodbros.exe. Bae goes nuts over bling bling, shows it to her fiancé. Dudut. Fiancé challenges me to a duel. Wield my shiny new sword, hop on a fountain edge and yell, "Come at me, bro." Fiancé is captain of the guard. Has been dueling for longer than I've had chest hair. Kicks my ass, takes my fancy dueling sword and spanks me with it. Bae is not impressed. Tells me to hook up with her younger sister. She's an only child. Go back to port. Ship is missing. Crew has mutinied. Check purse. 12 gold. Spend rest of my life hauling cargo from ships. Bae gets married to captain of the guard next month. MFW, I'm not invited. 11 out of 10 would lose life savings and get friend-zoned again. Planning on doing an all-nighter with some friends. What should I do? Where should I go? If you've done this before, please tell me any stories and advice on it and where to park, etc. etc. Damn, what a small world. I lived a few miles from the Hockomock Swamp for the last 8 years before my folks sold their house. Dirt biked in it with friends all the time, explored some of it and had a crazy experience which led me to stop exploring it altogether. I had heard stories from friends over the years who explored and camped in it, from beings living in the trees, pukwudgies playing pranks, to ghost children being seen around the swamp. Strange lights following people. GPS, electronics going haywire in the swamp. All sorts of weird things. I became fascinated with the swamp in 2014 after watching a doc about the Bridgewater Triangle. I spent some of my youth growing up in Bridgewater and wasn't aware of the history of the area. A few friends made a plan to check out the swamp one night and see what we encountered. We had 3 jeeps and used the entrance behind Rainham Dog Track to enter the power lines around the swamp. About a mile in, and our phones and one of my friend's jeep's electronics started acting up. I felt heavy, depressing vibes once we went further in, as if something wanted us out of there. We got further in and the vibe got even stronger. Something wasn't right. Nothing further happened after that and we decided to head home, with plans to explore it more in the future. That night, I had a vivid dream of a Native American on a hill, with a warning to never go back to the swamp again. I was woken up shortly after by a wooden shelf falling off my wall, and all 3 of my cats sitting at the end of my bed. I took the message seriously and never went back. If you're not aware of the history of the swamp, I would look into it. King Philip's War and the slaughter of the natives is deeply rooted in the swamp's energetic body. Supposedly, after losing so many of their men, the remaining natives cursed the swamp to be uninhabitable forever. Witches be bitches anon. Watch your head when you're out there. 1. Triangles are just a BS sales technique. Ignore any attention-getting, wannabe main character fool that grounds their claims in that nonsense. 2. Determine what legitimate hotspots there may be, and let intuition, not limiting beliefs, guide you. That's my 2C.
I told this to a handful of people right after it happened. None of them believed me, so I just never told the story again. But fuck it. I'm a little tipsy. 14 years old. Friend's birthday, he decides he wants to go to the beach. Like 10 of us kids there, my parents are the only ones who couldn't make it. Swimming close to the shore. My friend calls to me and says we're about to eat. They brought a grill and made hot dogs and burgers. Sounds goodman.png. I start swimming back when a mist suddenly rises. Can't see shit. Oh fuck. Desperately swimming now. I should be back already, but it's like I'm getting nowhere. Oh fuck, I'm gonna die. Suddenly feel someone grab my hand and begin to tug. Freak out at first, thinking some sea creature is dragging me away forever. Suddenly smell something sweet and feel calm. I let myself get pulled for what feels like a long way. Mist suddenly dissipates. Feel the hand let go of mine. I can see the shore and there are lots of people standing there. Swim back. Friends and adults are all freaked out and my friend is crying. Apparently I was missing for about an hour. Everyone was eating, so nobody noticed at first until my best friend asked where I was. Still not sure what if happened or what the smell was. It smelled really pleasant, like when you walk into a coffee shop, but not the same sort of smell.
Alright, I'm back. Be me, 19. Live on island chock full of caves. Not gonna say which. We speak English, it's the only hint you'll get. Anyways, I always like exploring the caves. I go fairly regularly, try to go caving at least once a week. One thing you need to know about these island caves is that they can be full of water. The tide itself can fill and empty entire cave systems. Some caves never fully empty, and you have to go underwater to fully explore them. The cave that I was going to explore would be partially underwater, meaning that I would be bringing some light scuba gear. I get to the entrance of the cave, gear up, and head down. I'm carrying my scuba gear until I reach the watery area. After a rather uneventful 30 minutes, I reach the part of the cave filled with water. I put on my scuba gear and submerge myself. Technically I'm not cave diving certified, but who gives a fuck. Explore one passage for about 15 minutes before I reach a spot that I need to squeeze through. Try to squeeze through, get stuck. Realize I should have been cave diving certified. Nothing to do but try to wiggle out. I've got enough oxygen to last me a while, but I'm still freaking the fuck out. As I'm trying to wiggle out, I start hearing voices. Initially think it's hallucinations due to dwindling oxygen levels, but again, I remember I have more than enough oxygen. I faintly see a shape ahead of me, voices growing louder. I flip out and shine my light at it. Looks like a head of some sort. It retreats into the shadows, voices become quieter. Again, it starts getting closer, and I have to drive it away with the flashlight beam. This cycle continues for a while. I'm still freaking out, but am slightly calmer than before. The sheer amount of times I had to drive this face back with the flashlight beam has somehow familiarized me with the horror of the situation. Of course, all stalemates must come to an end. My flashlight dies. Fucking.jpg. I start freaking out and struggling again. I can faintly see the shape getting closer. The voices start becoming much louder. I think to myself, what the fuck do you want? Almost instantly after, I hear a voice in my head. I need about tree fitty. The passage lights up, and I realize that the shape I was seeing was a 8-story tall crustacean from the Paleozoic era. That goddamned Loch Ness monster had tricked me again. Swim out. Never again go cave diving without proper certification.
Oh shit, those things. They exist in USA? I thought they were in Russia only. I've met that fucking thing once. You see, I grew up in a small village in Myob, and there was a swamp nearby, where partisans hanged out during WW2. Their common tactic was to lure the Fritz to the swamp at night, get him stuck in mud, shoot him, relieve him of all his equipment, and drown the body. So, the war is over, you guys nuked the Japs, Cold War, all that. And in about 40 years after the war, those things appeared. First, they just sucked blood from animals. You'd wake up at 5 a.m. as usual, go to milk your cow, and see these weird ass bite marks on their legs and sides. Looked kinda sorta like human, but a bit more space between teeth marks, and not tearing out anything, just the teeth marks. I am no expert in bite mark analysis, though. It could have been something else, but villagers were dead convinced it were those things. All I know is that those bite marks appeared on cows and pigs, that they looked humanish, and that those bite marks got infected really fucking easily. I've spent crap load of time cleaning them with my grandpa, every fucking morning after it happened. We tried to guard the bars at night, but whenever we put a guy with a rifle to guard it, the night was quiet and animals were fine. And whenever we decided that the treat has passed, and stopped guarding, bite marks were back on that fucking night. Eventually, at a village gathering, everyone pitched in, and my neighbor Uncle Colia just took a trip to the city, and brought back 8 young dogs. We placed them near the barns, and everything was fine with the animals ever since. But then, a baby disappeared. Just 7 houses away from me. The married couple there, the Kazatkinai I believe was their surname, had 2 kids, a 9-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. One morning, they wake up, and the baby is gone. Just flat out gone. No signs of break-in, doors and windows are all perfectly locked, the attic and basement are all fine. No blood, nothing. The family moved out after that. So, then, women going to the river for water at evening start saying that they see figures in the swamp. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2. Looked vaguely human, but could have been just tree stumps. Nobody bothered with that, until one of the women got killed. She was an old woman, a babushka, who decided to gather some swamp berries. When she didn't come back, a search party was organized. They found her corpse, with, not shitting you, her arm cut clean off. Not torn, not ripped, cut. Not even chop marks. I'd love to add some spooky details like her face being stuck in permanent horror grin, but the glimpses I caught of it over the backs of the crowd looked average. So, the talk of YBPB, Upir, a ghoul, started to go around. Some said that it's because Soviets blew up the churches back in the 40s, some said that it's the gypsies who were seen lately in the area. Around that time, Chernobyl disaster occurred, so some people blamed radiation and American sabotage. So, nothing much happened for a year, and then something weird happened. A local drunk, Uncle Misha, who fought in WW2 and got shot in the leg, was fishing in the swamp, until he saw that figure. He immediately fell on his knees, and started begging for his life. That thing just stood there, but he said he felt like if he'd move, he'd have his life ended right there. He cried, and started praying. He said that the figure reminded him of a Nazi he saw during the war, and he said please do not shoot in German. And what do you know, when he raised his head, the figure was gone. Although, it could have been gone when he was praying, who the fuck knows. At first, we just thought he was making shit up, but when another villager saw the figure, he begged for his life in German as well, following the example, and got away with it. It happened 4 more times since then. 3 times the people got away by begging for their lives in horrible German, and 1 time we just found the body with the throat ripped out. No clue if he said anything in German, or if it was something else. It's just since then, in our village it was decided that those are fascist corpses looking for partisans. And the old people, they said to if we see one of them, to repeat Bitnik Skiasen. Over and over. And then I saw one of them myself. I was black archaeologist in the swamp, trying to fish out any old World War II stuff that could be in the swamps. A guy of my age from the neighbor village found there, no shit, a fucking Mosin once. All rusted and shit, but still, that was fucking cool. So I was stalking around the swamp, and I kinda lost track of the time. Back then even a wristwatch was a luxury. So it's getting dark, and I turn home, only to see one of those fucking things. It was standing with its back on me. And the spookiest fucking part was that there was a tear in his chest and back, trough which I could see. And it was clear he was fucking hollow. Nothing inside, just a carcass made out of skin, swamp goop, and weeds. I dropped on my stomach, face in the ground, and kept quiet. I didn't dare to look up. I was like that for a lot, because I passed out, and got back to my senses only during deep night, because someone was screaming my name over and over. It was a search party, who assumed I was stuck in the swamp, or got attacked by those things. I ran to them, and never went to the swamp ever again. My little trip didn't go unpunished, though. I slightly fucked up my lungs from lying on damp and cold ground for several hours in just my shirt. Ever since I'm having trouble breathing when I'm physically exercising. Somewhere between 95 and 05, the village died out. No workplaces, no commodities, so everyone kinda moved out or drank themselves to death. I still wonder if that thing is out there, and what the fuck was it? To be fair, to this day I don't really buy that it was an undead fascist, but who the hell knows? I've kept quiet about it, but here you guys are, discussing them.
This isn't really in/out/story, but it happened on an/out/road trip in the middle of nowhere, so I might as well tell it. I've never written about this before because it was too traumatizing to think about for a while. So I guess this will be like a therapy session for me. So I live in Toronto, and just about the only good thing about this city is that you can drive 2 to 3 hours in any direction and be pretty far away from civilization. Last summer me and my girlfriend decided to go on a road trip from Toronto to Thunder Bay and back, with some planned out hiking/fishing stops along the way. Neither of us have ever been further north than Sudbury, so it seemed like it'd make for a fun adventure, visiting all the small towns along the way. Our route was to take Highway 11 way up north of Timmins and just follow it all the way to the end. Then on the way home we'd take Highway 17, along Lake Superior for a change of scenery. Just for some context, the 11 is the northmost major highway in all of Ontario and about as far away from civilization as you can get in a car in Ontario. Think driving through the Nevada desert but with trees and way fewer cars on the road. On the third day, the sun had just set and we were coming up to a very tiny town called Mattis, which is the purple circle on the map. Our plan was to look for a motel to stay at for the night. As we approached, we noticed a group of people, about 5 or 6, standing right in the middle of the highway, which goes through the middle of town. They were all facing away from us and it looked like they were just engaging in casual talk, in the middle of the road for some reason. I slowed down to a crawl as I approached, and they didn't seem to notice that we were there. I then stopped completely and we just sat there like WTF? I know it's a pretty barren highway, but this is still odd. So, I gave the horn a little tap. They immediately turned around in perfect unison, and I shit you not, their eyes were glowing green. And this wasn't the headlights reflecting off their eyes or that sort of thing. They were literally glowing like fucking LED lights. Needless to say, I nearly shat my pants and my girlfriend started screaming bloody murder. There were some guardrails on each side of the road which prevented me from doing a quick U-turn, so without thinking I just stepped on the gas and tried my best to split through the middle. As we got closer I noticed that they had weird body proportions, like their arms were strangely long and they were really tall and lanky. They weren't llamas though, definitely still looked human. They luckily reacted and got out of my way. While I was speeding through the town as fast as possible, I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings and my adrenaline was off the charts, but my girlfriend swears that as we were passing through, she could see the same glowing green eyes peering at us through windows in the houses we were passing. As we were leaving the town, which was only like 30 seconds of driving but seemed like an eternity, I looked in my rear view mirror and they were fucking running after us. And they were running on all fours. Like fucking animals. I'm getting chills just typing this shit out and reliving it. It was something straight out of a fucking horror movie. All I could see was this moving group of green lights/eyes bobbing up and down in the distance. I floored it and didn't look back again until we got to the next town called Hearst, which was about 30 km west. Did I mention my girlfriend was crying hysterically the whole time and pissed her pants all over my seat? Okay, so, those things were gone, and luckily this town was a lot bigger with more light, and there were other cars on the road, so we felt fairly safe here. We stopped at a pub, used the bathroom and ordered some drinks. We weren't sure what the plan was yet, but we needed to rest and chill for a bit. The place was pretty empty. The server was a middle-aged lady who looked pretty seasoned, to put it politely. After we got our drinks, I tried to think of how I could casually bring up what just happened to us without sounding like a complete schizo. So I casually said to her, paraphrasing, "Hey, so, seen any green-eyed goblins around lately?" And gave a really fake-sounding chuckle. I think she could sense the terror in my voice because she just gave me a blank look and quickly walked to the back room without even acknowledging me. A couple minutes later, a man who I assume was her husband comes out. He looks me directly in the eye and tells me to get the fuck out and never come back. I wasn't in the mood for a fight, so we complied and left. That's pretty much where the story ends. We ended up going back home the next day and never completed our trip. There's no way we could have enjoyed ourselves. Since then I've scoured the internet for similar stories, trying to figure out what the hell happened, but I've come up completely empty-handed. This is close. Looks like a good scenario for a thriller movie.
I love cryptid shit myself, so I was pretty excited when I recently found out that my late grandfather had an encounter with one when he and my father lived in the Soviet Union. Granddad, an electrical engineer, gets called to a town near the shores of the Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is known for, among other things, being fed by 330 rivers but emptying into only one. Having an incredible ecosystem of thousands of species, half of which are only found there. Being the deepest lake in the world. Being the biggest lake in the world, by surface area. And being the oldest lake in the world, as well as being the center of all manners of legends and creepy shit. So, my grandfather arrives by the time it's getting dark, so the client insists that he stay the night in the Gostanitsa, but not before inviting him for supper. Over the meager meal they discuss details of the problem and possible solutions. As the sky darkens, the client makes an odd remark that sounds out of place coming from the mouth of such a fellow. Do take care not to leave your room in the Gostanitsa during the night, there are creatures out there. After checking how much vodka the client had drank, my grandfather asks him what he means, and after a little hesitation and a request not for him to talk about this, the client obliges my grandfather. Around the forests we find huge mounds of droppings, with whole skeletons intact, of sizes everything between and including wolves to bears. These shit mounds are left by giant snakes that live in the lake. This was the only doubtful part of the story, as a snake usually wouldn't want to venture into the freezing cold lake. Though, it would make a great deal of sense for such a creature to reside in burrows underground. Reports of sightings of the creatures are only heard once or twice a year compared to the often seen mounds, because, well, human bones, too, fall under the purview of everything in between. And when a set of found, reports of a missing person from as far as a few towns over are never far behind. But try not to think too much about what I've just told you, just stay in your room for the night and do have a good night's rest. My grandfather had little trouble not thinking about it as he made his way to his room that night, as it frankly stunk of giant snake shit. So, giving the whole silly thing no more thought, he changed into his night clothes and swung open the room window to let a cool breeze in. He studied the schematics a little longer until he was satisfied that he had figured it out, then got up to extinguish the light to get some sleep. Turning towards his bed in the now dark room, he sees, peeking through the opened window, the head of a huge snake illuminated by pale moonlight, its further tongue flicking up and down. As any sane man would do, he ran into the closet and shut the door behind him. For not more than 20 seconds he heard the most infernal thrashing of wood against wood and leathery flesh, and of papers and bed covers being whipped about at breakneck speeds. That small time felt like an eternity, as did the minute or so until he heard a rapping on his room's door, and a man's voice. "What the hell is going on in there? You've woken everybody up, and I've called the police." Asterisk. My grandfather rushed out of the closet, through the wrecked room, and out into the hallway, slamming the door behind him. He gets accosted by the owner until the police arrive, who inspect the room, or what was left of it. Papers are all about, the furniture reduced to splinters, and the bed covers were nowhere in sight. My grandfather collected his few remaining things, and, as per police's orders, was given a different room for the night. One of them stepped aside to talk to my grandfather. "Don't open your window again. We don't want to come back here again tonight to recover a body, or worse." Rest of the trip went uneventfully. My grandfather fixed the problem, and promptly returned to Ukraine, where he and my father, then in his early youth, lived. But my grandfather did bring one thing back. On a trip to the Museum of Natural History, he brought it in between the pages of a book, meaning it was probably a scale. My grandfather shows it to the curator, who shows great interest in it. My grandfather relates the story of how he got it as the curator inspects excitedly. The curator asks if he can hang on to it to conduct some research, and ensures my grandfather that he'll show him his findings. My grandfather accepts, and parts with the thing. but the curator never did get back to him. But my grandfather did get back to the curator, after having some difficulty finding him. The curator responded almost angrily to being questioned about the item and his research on it. "That thing you brought me was a hoax, and nothing more. I've decided I want nothing to do with the damned fake, and I suggest you decide the same." And that concludes the story. Now, the strangest thing about this story, at least to me, is that before hearing it, I had heard of all sorts of strange goings-ons in and around Lake Baikal, but never of anything like this. The only thing relatively close was a single isolated mention of a possibility of a Nessie-style plesiosaur-type thing entering the ecosystem through one of the 330 rivers feeding the lake, since one of those things could possibly be mistaken as a giant snake. But there's just about nothing else. Quite the peculiar affair, isn't it? What's hiding, or being hidden at the Lake Baikal?
I'm going to be honest and say that I'm not a big believer in most of the cryptids that get mentioned here frequently. I try as hard as I can to maintain a skeptical mindset when studying these kind of cases, because, while I want very much to believe in fantastical species that we haven't discovered yet, the evidence, whether anecdotal or physical, has to be there. The cases that are truly worth studying are the unknowns, the ones that withstand scrutiny and still have no rational explanation, made by credible witnesses who never sought to profit off of their experience. That's why the underwater sighting of American Navy officer Captain Marvin McCammys, while accompanied by Captain Bill Rainey, stands out. Both were in the famous deep-sea submersible, Alvin, on July 1965. Sent down to check on the listening array Artemis, they were in a very deep area in the Bahamas, known as the Tongue of the Ocean. According to McCammys, the submersible was already about 1,500 meters, 5,000 feet, underwater, when they descended another 90 meters, 300 feet, following a cable that spanned a crevasse. Noticing movement, McCammys first thought that the sub was drifting along the cable, but realized that it was the object that was moving. Swinging around the submersible in an arc, he observed what he first thought was a utility pole. In Charles Berlitz's Without a Trace, an overall collection of strange encounters in the Bermuda Triangle area, he describes his encounter, which visually sounds like a plesiosaur, an extinct marine reptile commonly used as an explanation for sea monster sightings. "I was astonished to see a thick body with flippers, a long neck, a snake-like head with two eyes looking right at us. It looked like a big lizard with flippers, it had two sets of them. Then it swam upwards with its back turned before we could get the cameras angled. They were set to photograph 15 to 25 feet in front of the submarine, and the thing had already swum out of the camera angle but was still around." The shock of his encounter compelled McCammys to return to the surface, where, with a lack of proof for his sighting, he was laughed off the deck by other officers. He entered the sighting in the wet log, but he believed it had been deleted by the Navy and thus did not appear in the final log. McCammys claimed that in 300 to 400 undersea dives, he had never seen anything similar. McCammys, who died in 2004 and is thus sadly unavailable for further interviews, was a highly respected and decorated officer in the Navy. He received a Meritorious Service Award in 1966 for recovering a hydrogen bomb lost in the Mediterranean. From 1966 to 1977, he held the position of Research Associate in the Navy. Adding to his credibility is the fact that he also wrote several scientific publications. He also worked with Bob Ballard, a professor of oceanography who worked with National Geographic and discovered the Titanic in 1985. Bill Rainey, McCammys' companion, was a similarly respected Navy officer, and just as experienced as McCammys in deep-sea diving. He was also a recipient of the Meritorious Service Award. Sadly, he passed away in 1985. Charles Berlitz's book, while it does at least make some attempt of skepticism when going over cases, is still easily comparable to many less credible, pulpier publications, so I felt the need to find McCammys' encounter mentioned somewhere else. I talked to respected cryptozoologist Scott Martys, who communicated with McCammys over a phone call sometime in the late 90s, and confirmed that the sighting had taken place. McCammys only had one correction to make, that Berlitz had incorrectly placed the date of the encounter at 1969 as opposed to 1965. Marty's also mentioned to me that he had sent McCammy's illustrations of plesiosaurs, as well as the popular depiction of the Loch Ness Monster. McCammy's stated that they looked similar to the creature he had seen. I find this case much more credible than most for many reasons besides the witness. Most sightings used to bolster the prehistoric survivor paradigm involve a head or a few humps. There are very few sea monster sightings that describe seeing the entire body of the animal, making it easier to write them off as a misidentification of animals known to science, like seals swimming in a path, or an oarfish. This is the only underwater sighting of a plesiosaur-like animal I have heard of. Not only that, but we are still discovering large animals, over 20 feet, in the ocean, such as the beaked whale. Beaked whales are the deepest diving mammal known to science, with a record of almost 3,000 meters. The fact that they are regular deep divers means that some species have only been observed once or twice, and often only as washed-up bodies, despite their size. A darker variant of Baird's beak whale was classified as a new species as recently as 2016, and it was only known from a couple bodies, and whaling/museum records. The species is still over 20 feet long. While this animal already belongs to a known extant group, it still lends much credibility to the plesiosaur hypothesis.